welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. This is the place where we take a no bullshit look at life's little lessons. Here, together, we find the spiritual glory in even the most wicked hard story. This is a journey from fear back to love and how we can find our greatest strength and happiness in some of the most unlikely places. I believe that if you're willing to change your mind, you can totally change your life. So, are you ready to rewrite your story and choose to live free? Let's do this. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I am not sure. What episode is this going to be with my beautiful friend? I think it's going to be 38. Let's call it, I could be wrong, but let's call it episode 38 of the Karen Kenney Show. And I am here today with you guys with my friend and also, interestingly, one of my current spiritual mentoring clients. And I've never had a client on the show, so this is wicked exciting. It's really fun. So this is Stacy Krecklow. And Stacy, some of you who are listening might totally know who she is. She's kind of I think she's a little bit of a local celebrity because she is one of the founders and owners of Ohana Kitchen. And there's three locations. I'll let her tell you about that. But there's one in Portsmouth, Exeter, and now Newburyport. So she's a hardcore entrepreneur. And she used to work for Flatbread for like 18 years. I'm just giving you the gist. I'm going to read her official bio because I always like to make sure I'm doing it right. But fellow Masshole, Masshole in the house from Amesbury, Mass, which makes me wicked excited. She's married to her sweetie, her husband, Jay. She also has a young daughter named Prudence, who we call Prue. And she also has an adorable Wheaten Terrier named Henry, who I'm a little obsessed with. She lives in Portsmouth. Here's the thing, though. She spent over 18 years working on culture-based sustainable restaurant group called the Flatbread Company. And during this time, she became wicked passionate about employee culture, community-focused business practices. We're going to talk about this too. And she helped create the management leadership program for the nationwide brand, which tells you she's a wicked smarty pants. Okay. This led her into her passion with business and leadership coaching, and she works with entrepreneurs and upcoming business leaders. In 2017, they opened their first Ohana Kitchen in Portsmouth. Then beginning of 2018 or 19, they opened their second locations, Exeter and Newburyport. And just so you guys know, if you haven't been there, check it out. I always get excited about Ohana because what they do is they create these delicious poke bowls. I don't know. I always want to call them poke bowls. And she has vegan options, so score a win for the vegans. And let's see, and the restaurant has care towards environmentally friendly practices and something we're going to dive into that is a big passion of Stacy's, servant leadership culture. So, Stacy Krecklow, thank you so much for being my guest on the Karen Kenney Show.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so excited and so honored, and I can't wait to jump in.
Yeah, so first of all, let's just start at the beginning a little bit, which is you are also a kid from Massachusetts. And it's funny because like a couple of our other friends, but one of them, Jessica Todd, JT, who's a really good friend of yours, is also a fellow Masshole. And we kind of like laugh a lot about how, so many of the kids that we know from Massachusetts, we're just like kind of like natural underdogs. Like, we kind of come from these circumstances that maybe aren't ideal. And we're a little scrappy. We tend to be a little scrappy. We tend to be a little resilient. I call it hardiness. We tend to have a certain kind of hardiness to us. So I would love to talk about this story of like, I often say, part of knowing where you're going is you got to know where you're coming from. And I think for a lot of us blue collar kids, where we came from gets deeply embedded, I think, in our work ethic, in our attitudes, in the way that we approach things. So can you just tell us a little bit about your origin story, where you came from, what things kind of look like, and how did you become like this little Masshole kid with the odds stacked against you to now having like this little Ohana Kitchen empire? So talk to us a little bit about that.
So, well, first off, I love my Massachusetts people.
Yeah.
I do. And it's so funny. My husband is born and raised in New Hampshire. And so there's been moments where I get a little feisty and I'm like, oh, that's just my Massachusetts coming out. That's just me. That's just my Mass. So second off, I think sorry, Karen, you're breaking up a little bit on here.
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
I didn't say
good.
anything though. I think it
All
might
right,
be
that's
on
great.
your end. Yeah.
Great.
So I
Okay.
didn't say anything. So just tell me. You hear me?
Great. Yeah, I can hear you perfect.
Cool.
Great. So my origin, I was born in Newburyport, Massachusetts, 1980. That's my age. To my mother, who was 16 years old.
Wow.
Which is we can go into that of later on, kind of with everything. So 16 years old. Living at the time in Amesbury, Massachusetts, where my parents were. By the time my brother and sister were born, they were born within the next 3.5 years. So with all of that, by the time of 21 years old, there was 3 of us with my mother
Wow.
and my father at the time. Yeah. And so starting with, for me, I don't really have the earliest memories of that time, but later on, years later, I'll tell you, I started watching 16 and Pregnant because I thought that that's where I was going to get my information from. I was like, I'm going to learn what happened to me on this MTV reality TV show, but it's a joke. But so 16 growing up there, they got a lot of help at that time from my father's mother, and living up here in like aunts and uncles and things. Mm-hmm. By the time my brother and sister were born too, my parents had been married and divorced to each other twice. So that's an interesting little tidbit.
So they basically got married. So how old was your dad? Do you remember when you were born? Do you know how old he was?
He was in his early 20s.
Okay, yeah. So early 20s, you basically have what I always say, like, because that's what it was like for a lot of us back then. You had babies, my mom had me when she was 20, but had my sister, I think, when she was like 18, right? So it's like babies raising babies. Mm-hmm. So then you can tell there's like this push-pull with them because married, divorced. So not a lot of stability in your earliest, basically, developmental years.
Yeah, exactly. As years go by, they were divorced again, and my father joined the Army. So it was my mother at that time with just the 3 of us.
Oh my God.
And at one point, we were taken away from her and put into foster homes because she couldn't support us, and it wasn't a healthy environment. So at that point, foster care, and then for about a year in our lives. And now these are my earliest memories. So 5 and 6 and 7 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in the foster care, and are there any special circumstances other than, and it doesn't mean there has to be, but other than your mom just being wicked young and having her hands full?
Yeah. What ends up happening? Yeah. So we find out years later, I knew kind of at an early age that something wasn't quite right. Yeah. Something wasn't quite right with my mother. So there's a lot of memories, but we found out years later that she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Oh my gosh, right?
So during that whole time, also having children at a young age and kind of battling a lot of other, from addictions to mental health problems, it kind of all combined. It came out years later when we were in our teenage years, when we started to really understand it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So having that, and we didn't know, there was also some back and forth from foster care then to grandparents, then flying across the country to Washington, back to Massachusetts, to then my aunt, who is one of the most amazing women, and I couldn't talk more highly of her and how much I love and adore her, kind of took us all in with her 3 children. So in Amesbury, and that's, we get there and then we go back with my mother for a little bit. And that's when it was discovered that there were some things happening. Illness. Yeah. Mental illness. Uh-huh. Yeah. And it's when it's hard when she was a very charming, really beautiful woman. And
Yes.
sometimes that can mask mental health issues. It can be really tough. And so with the three of us, we kind of became three musketeers. We really leaned on each other. And my brother and sister are both younger than me.
So
But
did
we
you
kind of
kind of
were one of
become
the
more like the mom figure in some ways? You started taking care of everybody in some ways? Were you the protector? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I definitely would say that. I would say that. I think they might too.
Right.
But the three of us were kind of all we had, the three of us as siblings. Having my aunt and having her come back in and be with us and have the three of us, and then there were six of us with my three other cousins.
Sure.
That was one of the more like happier, stable times in my life. And I look back, even though we were crammed into little bedrooms, sharing four of us to a bedroom, three of us to a bedroom, for those
Yes.
couple years, those were the most stable kind of years in my upbringing. From there, my father got out of the Army and then got parental, custody of us when I was around 9 years old. So it's kind of meeting him for the first time in a way, even though we had known him when we were younger. It
Yes.
was a whole new world. So he moved up to Amesbury, and we jumped in and started living with him. I would end up at my aunt's a lot too, but we kind of went back and forth, and that's how we ended up in Amesbury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, not a lot of consistent stability. So I'm curious as to I only know my own story and what that experience was for me after my mother was killed, and having a wicked unstable childhood, and then going in to move in with an aunt and uncle who were like strangers to me. And I was with them for like 4.5, 5 years before I went off to college. And I know what my own coping mechanisms were, like however I was trying to navigate it, some internal, some external. So how would you say, like, what were your, how I talk about like try to move through the world, but nothing to attack, defend, or prove. Right.
Yeah.
But when we're young kids and we're just like shit, like everything is a mess. There's nothing reliable. Like, I know for me, like I started to develop like a touch of OCD because I was trying to control everything just to feel safe. So I'd be curious if you're cognizant of, or if you remember, and I started drinking too young, and I started doing drugs too young, and smoking and trying sex and doing all these things. So was there any kind of repercussion or consequence or choices that you were making that started to reveal themselves? I don't think I know this answer about you yet. Like if there were particular things that you did.
I think going around, I had this need to prove, even as a young age, that I was good enough, that I was, lovable, that because I think we all just wanted that love and that stability that we just didn't have as children. It never really felt safe as a child. We didn't know where we were going to be the next day, or what person where we were going to go, or who we were going to see, or how long we were going to stay in one place. And so when I felt that stability, when I had that, I was like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can. So I stay here, and the people that are in my life give me this love, and they keep us safe. So I'm going to be the best kid ever.
Yeah. So
I'll clean up my room. I'll do this. I'll listen,
Yeah. So would you call it, so the three things that immediately popped into my head, I just want to see if any of them ring true for you: perfectionist, people pleaser, and overachiever. Any of those?
Yeah. All three.
Yeah.
All three. I would say all three. I mean, sometimes the perfectionism, would be overwhelming. It was almost like it became the opposite for when I was like, I'm just not going to, do that. The people pleasing is definite, but the perfectionism came up a lot. It comes up in my work. It comes up in my, comes up over and over in my life.
Yes.
The people pleasing comes up over and over and over in my life as well. And that's something where I just, someone was just talking recently, I heard about how this person needed a pretty bow after every conversation with something. If it was a hard conversation, there needed to be a pretty package at the end, right? To be like, okay, everything's fine. I felt that touches me so much. I have such a hard time with leaving things how they are. and not fixing them.
Yes.
So fixing, and it's something that comes up and that I have to kind of be aware of and know, okay, I'm doing that again. Maybe this isn't for me to fix.
Yeah, because sometimes it feels like I need it to look, whatever the word is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but whether it's complete or it has to be smooth and clear, no rough edges. I just mean emotionally, like how a thing feels. Like if anything feels like it's not settled or smooth or okay, like that can like get in your head. Like for somebody with, because I totally relate on so many levels to a lot of this. I'm just like, kind of like laughing about it. But it's like, yeah, I just want it to be a nice, neat little bow. I just want it to be wrapped up and it's okay. Because you can't feel, for those of us who grew up not feeling safe, that's a really big thing. Like we're okay, right? Like everything's okay, right? Like just, you know, we just want everything to be like, people at home, people who are listening and not watching, I'm doing these things with my hands, like it's all just okay. It's all just like smooth. It's all just like good. Because it's unnerving. There's there can be an unsettled part. So much of my own work, like over the years in my spiritual work, is exactly what you said. I am a compulsive helper, right? And I love to fix. I love to step in and be helpful, right? And be valuable and bring value and do all these things. And yeah, as part of my work that I do in the world, it's important and it's great. But at some point, exactly what you said, you have to realize like, oh, this isn't for me to fix. There's no making this situation into a tidy bow. And it's learning to get comfortable with what is. Exactly what you said, just how things are. It was what it was. There's no, like in a lot of 12-step programs, they have a great saying that says, you can't build a better past.
Yeah.
It was what it was. You know what I'm saying?
It's so powerful. I know it's daily. That's a daily practice for me, you know, especially with even holding people accountable for work-related things or just boundaries in my life. Creating those, saying no to people was really hard for many years.
Yes.
It ate me alive. I was yes, because that need to be liked and that need to be accepted and loved. And that's why I thought, that's how I was subconsciously getting the love that I wanted.
Yeah. So this is so powerful. So walk us through how you go from this kid who's like kind of like ricochet rabbiting all over, Massachusetts, like going here and then going here and then flying out there and coming back. And then at some point it's like, you're not that old. So how old are you right now? 36, 37. I always want to say 39. How old are you?
I'm 39.
Okay, so you're 39, but you spent over 18 years with Flatbread. So you got in there pretty young. So how does this kid who's got the unsettled home life, you had a beautiful auntie who was caring for you, but dad is kind of all over the place. Your mom is schizophrenic, all these things, these siblings, there's all this stuff. And then 18 years in Flatbread. So there's a missing chunk. What happens? How do you step into the entrepreneurial world or the business world, the corporate world, or whatever you want to call it? Not entrepreneur. You became an entrepreneur, but when you were working for this other company, how did that happen?
I started working at a young age, and I loved responsibility. Again, people pleaser. So I was like, I'm going to do this. And I was like, we never had a lot of money. Yes. Ever. My father, a side note for my father, my father he was so young and coming out of the army and all of a sudden having these 3 children. He did the best he could. He always did. And I believe that, it's hard having 3 kids that come from there's trauma and all of this. There's, you've said it before as people, we are, you said it to me and I'm not going to say it so eloquently, but, or how you say it, but, we're very complicated as people. And I mean, children are too, especially coming from the background which we came from.
Yes.
So kind of going, you know, for me, again, I go to work. I wanted to work. I was babysitting at an early age. I wanted responsibility. I loved playing sports. I was, you know, there's a lot of stuff of proving myself that I wasn't my circumstances. I think at a young age, I didn't, you know, there was a lot of this kind of masking and hiding of where I came from. And it was one of those things like, I want people to judge me or look at me, you know, as who I am. And this is at a young age. I can remember thinking that at like 11 years old, you know, I'm in the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade of like showing up and wanting to be who I was and not be judged from where I came from. Because you can feel that as a kid. You can feel that early on as a kid, as a child. Can I
ask you to just be specific, a little more specific here? And really, it's not because you're not doing a good job. It's just that I'm wicked curious. The inner workings of people, like I always say, why man does what he does, is to me the most like fascinating thing, the inward journey. Like a lot of people always say to me, I'm so surprised you don't like to travel, like and go to other places. I go, trust me, I travel all the time. Like going inward is the most fascinating thing to me. So when you say I wanted to be, you know, kind of like accepted for who I was, like who I was now and not where I came from, those words, not where I came from, it's less about geography, like being from Massachusetts or being from Amesbury. It's more about those circumstances. Is that what you mean?
Yes, 100%. It's about the circumstances. You know, there's having, I couldn't tell someone, oh yeah, my mother, or even, you know, I like coming and living with my cousins. I loved my cousins so much, and my aunt, you know, they had my aunt, that was their mother. Yeah. And I think that there was that disconnect, you know, and disconnect for me, you know, and then also you know, some of the deeper trauma that came from spending time with a schizophrenic mother, that when it was just 3 kids and her. So there's all these instances and things that have happened over and over that I was like, this isn't right, you know, at a young age.
Sure.
So I think it was a lot of that, you know, I'm not the crazy, you know, like I would think in my head, I'm not the crazy you know, person that I came from.
Now we're getting somewhere. Yeah. Now we're getting somewhere. That's what I'm talking about. So that's what I'm saying. So it was more about like, because you felt if people knew, this is like a Mad Lib, you know, when you fill in the little thing. So what was your little brain thinking? Like, if people know that I have a schizophrenic mom and I kind of bounce around and I was in foster care and I live with my auntie and I love my auntie, my auntie loves me, but she's not my birth mom. She's not like my mom. There's that little disconnect. And then you're aware of like, oh, well, my cousins, this is their mom. Like all these, there's so many dynamics, Stacy, in your younger years, right? So, but what's the heartbeat? What's the crux of that? I don't really want them to know my past because they will what?
Yeah, I think it would be judge me or not love me or not want to be around me. Yeah. And I would feel alone and scared. Yeah, you know, as a child, you have that, you feel that. And we felt that, you know, we definitely did. And I say we, you know, I shouldn't be saying my brother and sister and myself, because we all have our own perceptions of what everything that happened. 100%. You know, for me, I can only speak from my truth and where I'm coming from, but it was definitely that. It was this scared little girl who wanted to be loved.
100%. And, you know, we talk about this because as I said at the beginning, if you're just tuning in, you know, Stacy is one of my mentoring clients, and I'm obviously not going to reveal like anything we've talked about, but I can say very generically, you know, we've talked a lot about that. When something is bubbling up in your life, we often talk about like, okay, who's really reacting to this or responding to this stress or whatever? Is it 39-year-old Stacy who totally has her shit together and like is so amazing? Is it the defensive teenage, whatever age, you know, I call mine Vicky with 2 Ks from Lawrence. We've all, you know, heard me talk about her. But there's this really younger version of you, that little girl. And I often
Mm-hmm.
talk about how in the work that I do, you know, people will often say to me, oh, you only work with adults, right? Because people have said to me, would you work with my daughter? Or would you work with so-and-so? And we talk about their ages and where they're at and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, so you don't really work with kids. And I say, oh, well, I mean, technically I work with quote unquote adults. But what I'm really mostly dealing with is little kids. I mean, like they're in big bodies, they're in big adult bodies, but it's so much of the trauma in the stories of our younger years that have not been resolved yet or looked at with a new perspective or a new light. So this is, you know, so much of the work that we do. So I have so much compassion, like as you're talking about this younger version of you, because you did with so many, and I could look at Jessica Todd, it's the same thing. You do with so many powerful women that we know is when we and like who on some level, I always jokingly say, who didn't have a fucking hard childhood, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The circumstances are different, but that little girl though was like that she's still with you, but you know, there's so much determination in your story. It's like, I, even at a young age, like you're like, I'm not going to let this hold me back. Right. Yeah. And it was part of actually the fuel that was like driving you forward. And just one of the things I want to acknowledge is that not getting, and this isn't to say that your mom didn't mother you at all, or that your auntie wasn't, you know, a really great, you know, surrogate mom or anything like that. But when you don't get the kind of mothering and stuff that you need as a little kid, and you become really aware of it, let's just call it parenting, not just mothering, right? When you don't get the kind of parenting that you need, for you, it actually reflects in what an incredible mom you are now, though.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I look back on different times in my life, and there was definitely amazing women who stepped into my life at different times.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful, and I'm so thankful that I was able to hear them when I did.
Yes.
At different moments.
Me too.
And there was
double
this,
amen hands.
Yeah, right.
Double
Yeah.
amen hands.
100%. And so I had some really pivotal moments, 13, 15, 16, you know, that were moving, of women that stepped in and had conversations with me, and I was there, and I had people that I could look up to and see and be like, oh, that's what a mother is. That's what a mother does.
Yes.
And, you know, even when my husband and I got pregnant with Prudence, and we were so excited, and we couldn't wait, there was still that, you know, that little piece, don't get me wrong, that little piece of, oh, I didn't have a mother, you know, my actual biological mother. All I saw from her was this, you know, obviously this mental illness.
Yes.
And there's always that, there was still a little bit of a fear, you know, but what I'm so grateful for too is that I have this opportunity, once I saw my baby, to be the best mom that I could possibly be. Believe me, we all mess up and we're all crazy.
Sure.
But I feel I'm so grateful that I have her and that I get to be a mother.
Yeah,
because it's changed my life.
Yeah, it's incredible. Mm-hmm. So I always say, you know, be the adult. Even like I don't have human kids, but I have furry kids. But I have spiritual daughters. I have spiritual kids, mm-hmm. right? You know, who like call me their spiritual mom and stuff like that. And I always say, you know, we have to become the parents, the adults that we needed when we were kids. Yeah. So that trauma also doesn't, we deal with our shit, right? We face our shit and we deal with it and we heal it. And, you know, we do the work so that it doesn't get passed on. Like the buck stops here, you know, and
exactly.
To circle back, because we kind of wanted, that's what happens on this show. So you said that, you know, how like this kid from this background ends up as like a rising star at Flatbread. Because I think you were also, correct me if I'm wrong, you were one of the few women like at that company. Like tell us about that. Yes. So you were always working, you were babysitting, mm-hmm. you had gigs, but then what happened?
Yeah. So I started working at Flatbread. I was in high school and I was a senior in high school.
I love
it. So it was crazy. And it was, you know, I played a lot of sports in high school, chorus, and, you know, I was involved in everything. Yeah. And, but I also was like, I need money. We don't have money. So I need to, you know, I want to go to college. I want these things for myself. And so I jumped in and I was there and I got a job the first day I was there and thrown in.
And what did you do? What was your first job?
I was working in the kitchen. So I did everything. I dishwashed. I expedited pizzas out to customers. I ended up moving my way up in the kitchen and being able to assemble sometimes. And I loved it.
Literally on site, like front of house, back of house, like you were in the restaurant business.
Yes, at 18 years old. Yeah,
I love it.
So I was really in the back, like in the kitchen for a bit, and then really I had a really wonderful manager that worked there, and he was like, oh, we should move you up front. We should do that. I moved for a little bit. I went to California for a short stint because I was like, I'm going to go to California because I'm going to get free tuition if I'm here for 6 months. So I ended up, coming back, and he's like, I don't know. And I was like, you need to hire me back. I want to work here. He's like, the second time you come in, the quicker they leave. And I'm like, not me. I'm going to work here forever. It was almost forever, it felt like, but yeah, I came back, and then I worked my way up, and I saw potential. The company only had one store, and then it was multiplying. And I saw potential in a company that I loved to work for. I felt I got a lot of, at that time, a lot of my self-worth from working there. I felt really good working there, and I got a lot of praise, and I loved it. And I loved that leadership role, being able to be in charge. I was a supervisor by 20. I started, I was like, there's potential. This company could go just crazy and open up, 1 million stores. They haven't done that, but so I kind of jumped on board and started traveling, and I dropped out of college to take my first big promotion there, and ended up becoming a manager in the Portsmouth, New Hampshire location. And then I worked my way up I worked in Hawaii. That's where I got my Hawaii background, and my sister's out there now. And moved out there. I lived in Boston for them, opened restaurants, helped with franchise development, did a lot with the company, ended up working for their corporate the last 12 years I was there, which I loved. I loved my job, and I wore so many hats.
You were clearly really good at your job, and they rewarded you, right? It sounds like they knew what they had in you.
Mm-hmm. It was a really incredible company to work for. And, during the time I was there, I definitely was one of the youngest, and then not so young by the time I left, but women employees, managerial employees. So, and then I was again at the corporate office for years. I was the only woman. So the only woman that worked for the corporate, the regional managers, the executives, and I was the only woman. So that was kind of where we got that. At different times, different women would come in, which I love and adored, or worked some when I was on maternity leave, and then back. But when I left, another great woman in my life who worked with me for many years took my job, which was really exciting.
Oh yeah, so, I think you told me that story, how like you were like getting ready to, you knew that, spiritual team had given you the instructions, like we're moving on to whatever the next adventure is. And you basically had this really great person like step in and, kind of fill your shoes in a way. Yeah. So
she told me, like, I don't know, 5 years previous, she sat down with me and I said, what do you want to do with your life? I'm like, where do you want to go? What do you want, to her? And I was her regional manager, and she looked at me, she's like, I want your job. And I was like, I looked at her and I was like, okay, you're going to get my job. And I remember sitting there and telling her that, because I knew I wasn't going to be here forever. I knew, I could do some other things. I had other goals and dreams.
Yes.
And that was something that it made me feel so great when she got the job. And I was so proud of her because she was the best person for the position.
And she had a great mentor. She had a great person grooming her and leading her, and like, in some ways holding her hand and doing that. And it's so important. Don't you think it's so important? Like, because here's a pointer to your character. She could have said that, and if you had been a different person, that would have been threatening to a lot of people. You know what I mean? Yeah. But you were just like you said, you're like, okay, let's do this. And then like, you knew you were going on to other things. So I think that that's really beautiful about supporting other people's dreams, and the fact that you had enough confidence to know like, okay, I have other things I'm called to do. So walk us through, because this is a place where a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs or about to be entrepreneurs, or people with their big dreams and their big whys and all this stuff, they're in a place where they're getting paid consistently. They're fucking good at what they do. They know the rules. They know the game. Super safe. Now, one of your driving forces in life is, I want to feel safe.
Yeah.
And then you're like, have this super safe job. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to go into entrepreneurism, which all bets are off. All bets are off.
I know.
So how does that happen when you go from the cushy 18 plus years to, I'm gonna roll the dice and see what happens?
Yeah. A lot of self-work.
Yeah.
A lot of self-work. I mean, the last, I'm such a proponent with getting yourself a coach. And like, I had a coach for 7 years even before I met you, and
Yes.
we knew that. And I was so lucky to have that. And but I worked, so much self-work. It's crazy, and so much self-worth, and all the stuff that comes up is like the little me, the little girl me, and now the 39-year-old me. There was so much stuff that I kind of had to say, it was like insanity. I was doing the same things over and over. I felt I got to a point where it was all of my self-worth was my job.
Yes.
And that can be debilitating, it can be anxiety and depression and all of these things. And this was years ago, and this wasn't even for my own company, but I felt I was so connected to it. And, that's why I love Flatbread, because they're really good at really putting a great purpose there where people feel incredibly connected and they treat people well. So that's why they have employees that stay there for 18 years, So anyways, I'm there, and I needed to I ended up getting a coach, had a wonderful coach who I worked with for all these years, and worked on myself and really started figuring out I'm not my job. I'm not my form. I'm not all of these things.
Yes.
And I started to, that's when I had that conversation with the manager, when I was like, let's do this. Maybe 4 years previous, she had said that, I'd be like, no way. What are you talking about? You're going to take my job? This is crazy. But all the self-work and the self-worth is, my self-worth went up, and my like the work and the practice and the daily practice and things that I was doing and looking at, all of a sudden, I felt, that things were limitless for me.
Yeah.
Things started opening up. Doors started opening up, and they're opening up still, like even in bigger ways than I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And I started to figure out what my passion was. And it was working with people. It was working, obviously a restaurant is an incredible vehicle to have that. I wanted to have a place where people could work, where they feel appreciated and loved, but they also feel not like they're just an employee, that they're a person. That I can help them. I can help them outside of work. Where do you want to go with your life? I'm going to do what I can do to help you.
So basically, I'm interrupting because I want to be clear about the restaurant thing, because your sweetie Jay, he already owned a restaurant or managed a restaurant or something when you guys met.
Yeah.
So
he owned a restaurant for like 8 years.
So who had the idea, and it might be a joint thing, but who was like, Ohana, poke bowls, let's open a business, husband and wife team, like, which is another whole
it really is.
Like a late night chat, you're hanging out, and it's like, I have an idea. Like, what happened? What was the jump into were you straddling worlds for a little bit, or were you?
I was straddling worlds for a little bit. But, we had a dear friend that lived in Hawaii, as an amazing chef, this woman, Gretchen, she came to visit us with her daughter and was like, you guys, they're doing poke in New York City. This is like 4 years ago. She's like, poke and sushi burritos. You guys should do that. And we're like, oh. And Jay and I, we love, we would sit down and kind of bounce back and forth restaurant ideas. because we've always loved restaurants. We love food. We're both, that's our, he's a political science graduate major from UNH. He's in the restaurant business. I mean, we had this funny thing, but we just both loved it so much.
Yes.
So we've had different ideas and different business plans that we had talked about. And we knew after our daughter hit a certain age that we were going to want to open something. And we wanted it to feel, really wonderful. We wanted it to be, healthy. We wanted it to be quick. We knew all of these things, and we had an obsession with poke. So he started coming to Hawaii with me for, over 10 years ago. Every year we would go, and we'd spend time with my sister. We would go out there with my friends and family, because I ran a restaurant out there for a couple of years.
Yes.
And we would literally land after 15, 16 hours of traveling, and we go to the nearest grocery store and eat poke in our car. We would literally sit in Hawaii, not even look anywhere, and we just eat the poke. So it was already a passion of ours. We made it at home for ourselves. We loved it. We started to kind of see it happening. Being pregnant, I was like, I want something quick and healthy. There was no options. Yes. There was 0 options for us to get that. So when she kind of
you mean here in New Hampshire?
Yeah, in New Hampshire. Yeah. And it was really hard for us, and even in Portsmouth. And so when we decided we were going to do it, when our friend Gretchen came out and said, you guys, and we're like, whoa, how have we not thought of this?
Yes.
This is what we need to do. And it made perfect sense. It was instant. It took us about a year of us really planning and looking at it. He really took the lead. I just had a baby and I was working at Flatbread. Yeah. And then with my coach that I was talking with, I kind of gave him, I said, here's the thing. I want to be financially stable. I want us to be making more money than I'm making now. I want our business running in 1 year. And within 1 year, I had given my notice at Flatbread, which I love them so dearly. But I gave my notice, which was hard after 18 years.
I bet, especially as a former people pleaser, right? I mean,
it was so hard. It was the first time I'd ever quit a job. It was my only job I'd ever had my whole life.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, I have to leave. And so we had opened up Portsmouth about 5 months previous. And then we jumped all in. We knew that we wanted to open multiple locations within a year.
You guys knew what you wanted to do. You're like, we're going to open 1, then we're going to open 3. Mm-hmm. And now like, here you are, like 3rd location just opened up. And interestingly, I just want to hear what this was like. You opened up in your hometown, like where you were born. Yeah. So that's like a homecoming. Like that to me is like a flagship moment where it's like, holy shit, like coming back to my humble beginnings. So can you just talk to us like maybe a little bit, if you feel comfortable, like what was that like to be like, oh my God, like I'm coming home. Must have felt, I imagine, really vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, so we opened up in Newburyport, which is right next door to Amesbury, but I was born in Newburyport. But it was, it's something that actually you and I worked on, I feel like, in your mentoring with me. It was such a big moment, and I was so vulnerable. And it was all the old stuff, all the time and all the practice and all the self-work and all of the stuff that I had worked on. It was all coming up again. So it was really, I was like, oh, are they going to like me? Is this good? Like, is this going to, are people going to be happy? Are people going to love it? And it was really funny, these questions that before I'd be like, oh yeah, everybody will love it. Before I'm like, it's right here. I'm snapping my fingers. I'm like, it's great. We love it. So everyone has to. But yeah, it was scary, but so incredibly exciting. And when we had our opening party and we invited a bunch of friends and family and people came down, it was one of the most joyous moments that I can ever recall in business, at least, and just in my life. And I was so proud and happy to be doing it with my husband, because he's so great and he works so hard and he was so happy. And then with all of our friends and family there, and everyone a lot of our friends too helped us. They helped us with the design, to the logos that we do, for the website that we've done. I mean, we have so many amazing people that show up for us over and over. And it was one of those moments that I got to thank everyone in front of a whole crowd. And it felt It felt amazing. Yeah. But it was so scary. It was way scarier than Portsmouth and Exeter. And I love Portsmouth and Exeter. But it was, oh yeah, these are the people that I grew up with. These are the people that see me and that have known me since I was that little girl.
Yes. So there's lots of layers here. So I want to talk about I mean, we could break that whole thing down and talk about that, but I want to just make sure, because I'm, so much of this show is definitely, it's about spirituality. It's about storytelling, and obviously part of the work that, we do in spiritual mentoring together is because it's not like I always laugh, like people think like spiritual work, this work is lifelong. It's not like, oh, dealt with it, solved it, because you'll be, it's just like grief, how grief surprisingly appears, right? Yeah. These moments and you're like, oh, this again? It's like, yeah, the grief is like this, it will come and visit you whenever it wants to. And I think it's also, there's so many, the body, I often say the body has its own story to tell. So, right, the cellular memory of your childhood stories in the subconscious, in the DNA of sorts, right? So here you are, like going back to the homestead or like the home court, like, where like the young Masshole like did her thing. And it's like, it's kind of this thing of like, oh, opening up here is like, kind of a big deal. And now I've got to kind of look at this and I've got to do it. But that's really what everyday life is we're constantly, I always say the last podcast I did is called The Consequence of Being Yourself.
Yeah.
So every day we're dealing with the consequence of being ourselves, right? And whether it's yourself from your past, or how you're showing up right now, or how you showed up yesterday, or whatever. So this being human, there's never a dull moment. But the beautiful thing about you is that you consistently, I always talk about clients, like, and I'll say, one of my friends said to me the other day, people talk about this all the time, like, what are your ideal clients? Like, what are some of the characteristics of your ideal client, KK? And I'm like, one of the top things is, and I could be really like, go totally Masshole and say, I don't want them to be fucking whiny. And I want them to be a hard worker, and I want them to not be afraid to make an investment in themselves. Like, put some skin in the game, motherfucker, like, and it's all those things. But if I said it in a more compassionate and gentle way, it's like, they're not afraid to do the work, right? They're not afraid to invest in themselves. They have enough of a glean of their value now, that they're like, I'm worth this. I'm going to take this, right? I'm going to show, like, they have a connection to something, or an awareness of something. Like, there's all these things. But you are definitely, I've told you this, we've been working together for going on 4 months. I'm like, but you are like my ideal client. You're one of my ideal clients, because you're not afraid to face what is arising. You're more curious about, like, and you can, if you say like, oh, that doesn't sound like me, you correct me, but I feel like you'll start to tell me a story and I'll be like, oh, I think I know what's happening here. And I reflect it back to you. And you're always like, welcome to hear, like, what's like going on. You don't deflect. You're not interested in being a victim. And obviously this desire to have this work ethic that I love. It's one of the things I often love about blue collar comeback kids, right? Underdog kids, is we're not afraid of a little hard work, which you've shown again and again and again. But the internal work is different. It takes a lot of fucking courage to face yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does.
So I'm just acknowledging that, I guess, is what I'm saying. It's not, if you want to expound on it, if you want to talk about it a little bit more, you can. So two things that I want to make sure we bring up before we hang up is, so you're working in this corporate culture, and something that starts to develop within you is this real passion to help people develop what you call service leadership.
Yep. Servant leadership.
Servant leadership. So can you just tell me just briefly a little bit about what that is to you and why it's important to you and how you think it plays a role in the success of a business?
Yeah. So being kind of the corporate environment and being around I mean, at one point, I mean, they probably had 800, 1,000 employees, right? And I'm a regional manager, so I have 5 restaurants. So sometimes there's like 400 employees under me. And then the managers and assistant managers and all of this. And we'd always kind of talked about enlightened management, but you could never kind of put your finger on what that really means.
Yeah, so it's one of those words, right?
Yeah, enlightened management. Like, what does that mean? I'm kind. That's good. But trying to figure it all out, and what does that mean? And it was I was given a book by a coach that was working with us at Flatbread, and who I worked with, the servant leadership book. And it was great. It's James C. Hunter. He's great. And I was given this book. I read it, and I read a lot of management books and leadership books. And I love that. I'm such a geek when it comes to that stuff. Like, give me all the literature and I'm going to read it. But it really resonated with me. And I started to figure out, I'm like, all right, this is my purpose. There's so much, not just the servant leadership, but helping others and feeding others. I feel like is a really spiritual thing as well. Feeding people good, healthy, beautiful food. And so I was looking at this, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense to me. Like, this is, be honest, the golden rule, care about people, hold them accountable, but come from a place of compassion. You say it all the time, and I think it's so beautiful. Honesty without compassion is brutality, and I love that so much. And it's so much of kind of in the servant leadership role, and trying to figure out, like, some people would think, oh, enlightened management or this, that, a guy had once told me, you're just going to open the safe and let people steal from you. And I'm like, that's not even close to what I'm talking about. I'm like, well,
no. That tells you a little bit about his.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So it was, so kind of starting to hit this and look at, hey, the pyramid, kind of this pyramid, like, oh, executives on the top, then the managers, then the employees, then the customers, like this crazy pyramid. And then in servant leadership, they flip it. So all of a sudden I'm on the bottom, right? I'm here to serve, like, and I'm fine with it. So I'm on the bottom of the pyramid as an owner, right? And I look at how can I help others, right? So It's almost like the employees are at the top and the customers are at the top. So it's looking at this place where I don't need to have all the answers. I can ask questions. I can be curious. People around me are amazing. I don't have to have that anymore. That's servant leadership. Instead, I get to help people. I get to hear. I get to ask questions. I get to let them make decisions. I get to give them autonomy. And this is another great book, Drive, Daniel Pink. And it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Giving people these three things that were given to me at kind of a young age for a company I worked with. I had a lot of autonomy, and I was getting my master's in business the whole time. I was learning so much.
Which speaks to, I'm going to interrupt really quick, because it speaks to this concept of this importance that society places on going to college, where I think so much of experience through apprenticeship is so powerful, or being in the environment itself, like direct. So this is what I talk about in spiritual mentoring with, when I always say, like, I'm not trying to tell you what to think. I'm just inviting you to think, like, to think for yourself, and to have your own personal firsthand experience with God, with the divine, with spirit, because that's how you'll build faith and trust. Yeah. Not because I told you, but because you found out for yourself. Right. And so that's what you're really talking about there, is you were immersed in this thing, and you got your quote unquote masters. You became masterful by learning on the job in the thing. It wasn't like, oh, 4 years of college, I got the thing, and now I'm able to do this thing, which I think kids who come up from circumstances that maybe they can't afford college, it's such great news. Yeah. It really is. I look at kind of the hospitality industry. I sit on a couple boards for them. One is the New Hampshire and Restaurant and Lodging Association Education Foundation I sit on. And it's really interesting because a lot of these kids, that's who I talk to a lot with Girls Inc. or different, going up. I'm going to be in Manchester for a high school boot camp tomorrow, which I'm so excited about, where they're all doing they're practicing making food and all that, because this is another outlet. There's still
the American dream, kind of working your way up in a business and learning and being able to be successful and then eventually open up your own business. I mean, it's there's still that avenue in a lot of these things. Yes. Yeah.
You're the poster child for that. Like, so that's like, I'm sorry, I got too excited. I was
it's
like,
really great. Yeah. It's really wonderful. And I feel, I have so much gratitude for where I've come from and everything that I've gone through to get to where I am in my life right now. And I know we can touch upon it a little bit, but even with working with you, Karen, and maybe this is a question coming up, but with my purpose and helping others, it's always been something in servant leadership, something in the last at least 10 years of my life or 8 years in my life that I've been so passionate about. But there was always something that was kind of missing. There was still something that was missing. And for me and our work that we've been working on, being able, well, first off, spiritual daily practice, my meditation and my prayer and really slowing down and meditate. I mean, meditation has just changed my life. Yeah, I feel like in so many ways. But then my story, your story to your glory. So I know today is kind of the first time that I've really talked about my upbringing and things that have happened to me. But you and I have been working on it, and this is a story that that we talked about. But I was at a Girls Inc. event, and I was talking to these young girls who were middle school age, and I was there and helping them prepare for what kind of jobs do they want and what do they want to do with their lives. And
so cool.
These kids they're so cool. Amazing, and it was so cool. And I had a lot of these one-on-one moments with them, and then I got invited. Two of the girls asked if I would go to lunch with them, and the speakers and the people could go to lunch with the kids. And they said, "Will you sit with me?" And I said, "Sure." And so I sat at this table with these like 5 young girls. Aww. And one of them started talking, and I opened up about my life a little bit. I was like, she was talking about her aunt, another thing. And I opened up about, for me going into foster care when I was a young kid and being brought up by my aunt and and meeting my dad at a different age and opening up a little bit to these young women, opening up a lot for me. And from that moment, the reality was for me in seeing this, the difference that I made in that young girl's life was, if I hadn't told her that or saw that, what ended up happening, I got a text from my sister-in-law like a week or 2 later, and she had written this beautiful text to me. She had met a woman whose niece was there at Girls Inc. and mentioned my name and said that now she knows what she wants to do with her life, and that I had made a big difference in this little girl's life. And so it was such a moment for me, and it made me be like, okay, opening up about my story helped someone, really deeply helped someone. And that's the work that we've been doing, of opening up and being unafraid to talk about my life. Yeah. What's gotten to where I am today.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think so often for really successful people, in the past, it was like, I'm not saying you felt ashamed of where you came from, but especially if you grew up in a situation where like a lot of us kids, right? You don't talk about what happens at home, or you don't talk about what happens within these walls, or this is private, or this is secret. So there's so many levels of why we might not want to reveal our past or our history. And I just learned as a writer and as a storyteller and as a speaker, the fastest way that I often connect with people is through storytelling. I understand and love the power of stories. So when we were, first starting to work together, and we were talking about this, and it was so powerful, and I was so grateful. I always say, like, spiritual team on the job, right? But I was so grateful that your courage and your bravery and your vulnerability was so immediately and powerfully rewarded, because you got to see that by revealing yourself and using your voice and telling your story, it was immediately impactful. And that young girl, like, you have no idea the miracle that just occurred. You can't even know. Yeah. Like you have an inkling of it. Like, wow, that was really powerful. My God, I got this beautiful text message saying I made a difference and it feels so great. But exponentially, that kid could go on to do the most incredible things, all because you were, you know, one of the people in her life that fanned the divine spark that lived within her, you know, and by you going first and by you letting down your walls. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful and I think it's powerful. And I think in some ways, as successful as you've been in your life in so many ways, I mean, that was one of the things we were talking about, like when we first started talking about, you know, if we're a good fit and working together and all this stuff. This is what so many entrepreneurs don't actually realize, is that you can have all the money, you can have all the success, you can have the nice house, you can have the fancy this and the fancy that. But if your spiritual life is not aligned, if you are not connected to something, whatever you call it, God, source, I don't care what you call it, spirit, Jesus, Allah, the universe, I'm not attached to what you call it. But if that element isn't being recognized, acknowledged, fed, daily spiritual practices or whatever, it will always, there's not enough money in the world to fill that hole. Can you hear me? Did you hear my?
I didn't hear the last part. There's not enough.
Oh, so I was just saying there's not enough money in the world that will fill that missing piece. As you were saying, there was still like this missing piece, you know? And so I think, just like I've often said to people who are hiring business coaches or strategists or doing whatever, it's like, you can do all the strategy stuff in the world, but if your mind is not aligned, if you don't get your mind, your heart, and your spirit right, like into a thing, you won't actually be able to take the action, because you'll keep self-sabotaging and you won't have, like, you know, the mojo to like really act upon the individual curriculum that's been given to you. And so, you know, it's like, I just think no matter how successful you've already been, I think through this work that you're doing, courageously doing, that I just think we can't even fathom what's going to happen after this with you.
I know. I feel the same way. I feel the same exact way. Yeah. You know, and the purpose, like for me to look to realize, like helping a young girl that's in a similar position that I was at that age, and really helping and really seeing that and have it come back to me. It's life changing. It's life changing. You know, we talk about self-worth and self-work and all of this and everything, and being connected to the divine and all of it. And it kind of all has come to this point for me in my life that I can give back, and that I am where I am. I'm allowed to, I can give back. I am, I know who, and I'm feeling my impact. Yeah. Which is making me feel amazing. And obviously I still want to do more, and there's more work and there's more stuff to be done, and it's daily. I know that, but I'm so this 2 hands up. Okay. Yeah. And so I think that, you know, it's really, let me just pause so I make sure I say this the right way. I think that part of helping others, like, this is so, like, people often say, like, I always try to remind people, like, everything that I teach, it's not because I've got it all fucking figured out. I mean, some stuff I've got kind of figured out, but for me too, daily practice, right? But it's like, everything that I teach, it's for me too. It's for me to hear too. Reminder to me too. So my point being is that by helping that girl and feeling your impact, and helping her, it's like, that's healing for you too. It's healing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like that little girl from Amesbury with the mom with the schizophrenia and the not feeling safe and the not knowing. It's like, you're stepping into your power now. And I always say, you're not the way that you are despite what happened to you. It's because what happened to you. So I'm so grateful for the shit show of my childhood. Like, I look back now, I know I'm not going to speak for you, but I look back now and I just think, oh, the glory that I get to experience now.
And it has nothing to do with material things, but the glory that I get to experience now from coming from my old story, the way I have rewritten my story with spirit, with the help of my inner teacher, with my spiritual team. Like, what a gift, man. What a gift that we get to do this work that we love in the different ways. And I think we get to do it the way that we do it and have a lot of gratitude for it because of where we started from.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is.
So you want to, is there any final thing? Is there any final thing that you want to leave our guests with? I definitely also want you to tell them how, like, where exactly your locations are, like Islington Street, whatever. So you can tell them after that. I'm going to ask you to tell us how to find you on Instagram and Facebook, your website, things like that. But is there any final, and this is like no pressure, it doesn't have to be like, but is there anything that's arising in your heart or in your mind that you want to share to anybody who might be listening?
Yeah, I think being open to looking at yourself honestly and looking like deep inside and being open to what else is possible. And in our lives, it's been such a big life changer for me. And I used to be so closed off to it. And so, like you said, like we didn't say ashamed, but like, or very much like, oh, let me just put on this perfect, this is how I am. This is the Stacy that I need to be to get what I need, or to get this, or to get this, love, or to get that. And once I finally started realizing that I needed to be open to, is there another way for me? Is this, because I wasn't feeling so fulfilled. Yeah. So I think to any of like my friends and my family, they hear me talking about coaching. They hear me talking about all of my stuff. I put it all out there now. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. You should be open to it. Yeah, we're all here. We're all doing our own thing. But for me, I was in the right moment, in the right time in my life. I started to kind of ask myself questions like, is this how I want to be? Is this where I want to be? Am I showing up? And that's it. I think just letting people know that anything is possible if you start to really look at your own bullshit.
Right.
And you do that. And I love that.
Yeah.
So,
well, because if I often say, if you're not willing to take a look at your own bullshit, if you insist on keeping up the blind spots to your bullshit, I guarantee you that in some ways you're also having blind spots to your brilliance. Yeah. And I think that it's important that we're just, and this is part of the deep spiritual practices, when you understand to whom you really belong to, when you really get that you're a child of God and you're fully innocent and you're fully whole and you're already fully holy, we stop being so afraid to protect and perform and to pretend we totally have it all together. Like I see this thing, and part of it, we don't even have to go there, but part of it is like the pressure of social media and appearing a particular way. Mm-hmm. But I've always said, like, one of my encouraging things to you was, because I do believe at some point you will be speaking on stages, you will be telling your story more, you will be being asked to be brave in more public ways, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, this is like the beginning of that. It's like we're going to start to not be afraid to share our story, because we know when you're doing the daily spiritual practices, we know who we are. We know that we're lovable, and that your past doesn't change that. You know what I mean? It's like, but it has definitely, I always say, we don't want it to define you, but it's okay that it informs you and it influences you and it inspires you. And so you're like a total comeback kid, and I love that. And I think it just shows people what is possible. But like you said, you have to be a participant in it. Like you have to be willing to go like, ooh, I got to look at some of these like parts of myself that makes me a little uncomfy. You know what I mean? And it's beautiful. And I think it's powerful. And I'm just so grateful for you. And I'm so happy that I'm really blessed that I get to work with you. It's been, we're only like 3.5 months in, and we're already, it's just like, whoa, like it's so exciting. So it's a great honor for me too, and a total joy and a total delight. And just knowing, I think that, there's a magic that happens when you find, I think, for the people who come to work for you, there's a magic that happens when they find, well, I'll call you the boss, but when they find a boss or a leader who truly sees them, who acknowledges them, who loves them. Let's just go there. I think a lot of people think you can't have love in business. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That's the whole point.
100%. I say love to my staff all the time. We talk about it in servant leadership of loving one another, agape love. It's a word I use always.
Yes. It's so
daily.
powerful. And it's, exactly. I mean, exactly. And like the whole thing, like Ohana, that word means family, correct?
Yeah.
So it's like the perfect name for, obviously it speaks to the product, but it's also the environment in which you've created.
Yeah.
And I think you basically created this home. And when you think about where you came from, it makes total sense. It's perfect.
Perfect.
It's perfect and it's beautiful. Yeah,
Karen, thank you so much.
Stacy, I just adore you. And will you please tell our listeners how that they can get in touch with you or find you on the social media, etc.?
Yeah. So on Instagram, we're Ohana Takeout. So you can go right on there, and Ohana Kitchen Takeout. You can take a look on Instagram. Facebook, we're just Ohana Kitchen. And we're located in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We're on 800 Islington Street in the 800 Plaza. We're in Newburyport. We're on 45 Story Ave, so right off the highway. Nice. And in Exeter, we're actually on a Portsmouth Ave, not to be confused, but we're on 45 Portsmouth Ave in Exeter. All three locations, we're quick serve, takeout, delivery. It's a real healthy poke, sushi burritos, sushi bowls, but also vegan, vegetarian, and all the other good stuff. I know.
I got so excited when I had my first bowl of yours, and it was like soy boy, which is really high quality tofu.
Yeah, beautiful.
I was like, this is so yummy. It's so great. I appreciate any restaurant that's given good vegan, sustainable options. Joe makes me so happy. The website is just
Ohana Takeout and Ohana Kitchen. Sorry, Ohana.kitchen. So there's actually and there's no .com. It's just Ohana.kitchen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you. And we've talked about this a lot because I know that the beautiful Ram Dass is near and dear to your heart, and I quote him all the time. I love him, and he is. And his teacher, his guru, was Neem Karoli Baba. And I know you know this. I'm just for the folks at home. And Neem Karoli Baba used to say something. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something that I've always found beautiful. And he said, "Feed people, serve people, love people, know God." And I think that that's what Ohana is doing. So we'll end on that note. And you guys, thank you so much for listening. I wicked appreciate your time. You could be anywhere right now, but you're here with us listening. So we always appreciate that. Thank you. And just know that, I always say it, and it can sound trite. You say something enough times, it starts to feel like, oh, she just says this all the time. But I really do mean it, that I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for you for listening. And those of you who share the stories on Instagram and you tag me and you let me know that you got something from an episode, or you send me a little love note. You have no idea how excited I get, because I'm kind of a geek. I'm kind of dorky. And I'm like, oh my God, they liked it. I get so excited because I am a helper, and it's one of the things that I love to do. So thank you. So those of you who give me feedback and have left a review or let me know, you share it with somebody, it means the world to me. And I really do. I may not see you with my eyeballs right now on this show, but in the context that I mean it, I see you and I hear you and I feel you and I celebrate you and I appreciate you. And as always, wherever you go, may you be a blessing. Bye. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.